In the lessons leading up to this lesson, you learned about two different types of compounds. You learned about crystal compounds and molecular compounds. Now, maybe you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself and you're thinking, when I learned about elements, I learned about crystal elements and molecular elements and atomic elements. So I wonder if we're going to be learning about atomic compounds. Think about that for a moment. Is there such a thing as an atomic compound? A compound is a substance made up of more than one type of atom, whereas an atomic element was made up of individual atoms that weren't bonded to anything else. In order for you to have a compound, you have to have at least two atoms that are bonded together. So this lesson is not about atomic compounds. They do not exist. Instead, we're going to be learning about a type of compound that is really important in the real world today. We're going to be learning about polymers. And the reason I say that polymer compounds are so important is because these have only been discovered, developed, and used extensively in the last few decades. Polymers are the substances that make up all rubbers and plastics that we use in the real world around us. They are very, very important substances. Not to mention that God also made polymers the basis on which living things are built. So in this lesson, we're going to learn exactly what a polymer compound is. To understand a polymer compound, we have to start in the same place we always start. Let's take a look at what a compound is compared to an element. A compound is a substance that's made up of more than one different type of atom, but it's bonded together with other atoms to make just one kind of building block. In these pictures, you see polymer compounds pictured way over to the right. The straws are made up of plastic, which is a polymer compound. What makes it a polymer compound? Well, again, a compound is a pure substance made up of more than one type of atom, and a polymer is a very large chain molecule that's made up of repeating units. These large chains are usually at least hundreds of atoms long, and they can be millions of atoms long. They are ridiculously large and visible by the eye at the macro scale. So you can actually see these molecules because they're so enormous. When we put polymer and compound together, we get a substance that's made up of different atoms in a large chain made up of repeating groups. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Here is the polymer compound that was the example from those pictures from before. This is polyethylene, and it's made up of repeating groups of one carbon bonded to two hydrogens. Do you see how there's one carbon bonded to two hydrogens, and then the next link in the chain is one carbon bonded to two hydrogens, and then another link of one carbon bonded to two hydrogens, and it just continues and continues all the way down the chain? That's what a polymer does. It has repeating units, and they repeat along a straight line chain. And I show that in my pictures by showing that the chain gets cut off on either end so that it continues in both directions. And it could continue for many, many, many atoms after the ones that are pictured here. Hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe even up to millions of atoms in a chain. Here's another way of viewing these polymers, maybe a little bit more up close. The chains look like this. They can bend and flex. Polymers make up very flexible, bendable materials, like plastics, but also like your skin or jello, which are both made up of polymers that have a lot of flex and bend to them. Also, what ends up happening with these long molecules is they actually overlap and wind around each other and twist together, giving polymer structures some rigidity too. It makes them hard to break while they're still bendable. So here's an example of three polymer molecules that are overlapping and twisting and bending and making a network with each other. These molecules aren't going to be easy to take apart from one another, but they still have the bend and the flex because they're just really long, bendable molecules. All right, let's take a look at another polymer. This is DNA. Did you know that your skin, your cells, your organs, your tissues are all made up of polymers? If it's a natural living polymer, we call it a biopolymer, and that's exactly what DNA is. It's a long strand of repeating units of a molecule, and those molecules bond together to make one gigantic molecule that goes for many, 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 many atoms. DNA is a polymer because it's a long chain of atoms that are all bonded together to make a gigantic molecule. Another example of a polymer would be cellulose, which we've also looked at before in connection with the Burning Money Lab. Cellulose is made up of repeating sugar molecules that bond together end to end to make extremely long chains. Cellulose is part of the structural material of plants, but we can also use it to manufacture cotton fibers that can make flexible yet durable materials like t-shirts or money. These are all polymer compounds because they're made up of different kinds of atoms, and those atoms are bonded together to make long chains. They are different from crystal compounds because crystal compounds bond together along a lattice in three-dimensional directions, in all directions. Whereas these don't bond in all directions, they just bond in one straight, one-dimensional chain. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about polymer compounds, a super important kind of substance to understand in the world around you.